This episode of Wheat Pete's Word is brought to you by Syngenta. Get the job done right the first time with Axial Max Cereal Herbicide Co-Pack for post-emergence grass and broadleaf weed control in Western Canada. New for 2025, Axial Max lets you manage resistance in your spring wheat and barley for cleaner, more productive fields. Visit syngenta.ca for more.
Good day, and welcome to Wheat Pete's Word here on Real Agriculture for Wednesday, May the 28th. Already the end of May. How can that be? On this episode of the Word, holy weather all over the place. Some woolly fun. My first alert of the season, unfortunately. And then agronomy answers, fertility, weed control, tillage, as much as I can get to before I once again run out of time. Let's go! Yes, holy weather. I don't know if you missed this, but incredible dust storms in Indiana. Sean Castile, the soybean specialist there, V4 soybeans. So that's soybeans with 4 trifoliates. Now, Peter Sikma just came home from there, and he said that, man, the corn and the soybeans in Indiana look amazing. They are dark green. They are way advanced of what we have here in Ontario. Meanwhile, they get a dust storm. I think it was the 16th of May. They already had soybeans with 4 trifoliates. Where the center of that dust storm hit, no more soybeans. No more corn either, but the corn growing point was still below ground. So the corn will come back. They are replanting soybeans. And you just go, man, you don't think of Indiana as dust storms because that's good soil. Yep, it's just almost like the dust bowls of the dirty 30s, which is a really scary thought, man. And we talk lots about residue and erosion control and everything, and I should do, and maybe I will do a whole Wheat Pete's Word on that, or maybe Lindsay could do an agronomist session on that. But unbelievable that you would have dust storms that cover 3 or 4 counties in Indiana, and it just wiped out the entire crop. Unbelievable. Meanwhile, that is not the story everywhere else. We get to Ontario. She is wet. East of Toronto, you go into Quebec, the Maritimes, the Ottawa Valley actually faring pretty well, but when you central Ontario really struggling to get crop in the ground, Quebec and the Maritimes well behind. Talking with Gord, with Mark, with John out in Nova Scotia, just cannot get anything done. In fact, in Gord's situation, he's just saying, I really wanted to no-till, but I think we just have to get over that in terms of when it gets late like this, if we have to do spring tillage, remember that most of the problem with tillage happens in the non-growing season. We got to get that crop in the ground. It's now getting into you all know it's important all the time, but it is getting to the critical stage. Meanwhile, Nick's saying the cold week in May, the warm week in May, we got 23 heat units per day. The cold week in May, we got 6 crop heat units every day. And Dale Cowan, great agronomist here in southwestern Ontario, saying, yeah, well, that might be true. But when you look at the total heat accumulation since we started the growing season, it's about normal for the wheat crop. We're 200 growing degree days behind last year, and that's what we all remember. But no, even Jeff Andreessen from Michigan State saying the same thing. Total heat accumulation is right about normal for the cereal crop. But normal timing, yeah, compared to last year, massive impact on the number of people that are going to be able to do double crop soybeans. If you were thinking about that after wheat, the chances of that are just backing up pretty significantly. And all that cold weather, well, we have frost that has hit some beans up in the colder part of Ontario. They're just touched by it. I think they're okay. We have yellow corn everywhere, and people is it the cold weather? Is it the rain? Is it the lack of sun? Yeah, it would be all of those things. The corn is simply yellow, and that's all there is to it. Talking with Horst Bonner, the great soybean specialist here in Ontario, and I sent him some pictures saying, holy, these beans are slow to emerge. And his response was, yeah, it's painful. And it's exactly right. Watching soybeans emerge, man, it is painfully slow. What's really cool or good, no crust. So we haven't had the big thunderstorms. So at least, even though it's taking a month, 30 days, 31 days for some of those soybeans to emerge, most of them, not all, but most of them are still making it. I'm really, really surprised that we haven't seen more insect injury. There is a little bit of black cutworm injury out there. There is a little bit of seed corn maggot, but it's almost like it's been plenty cold for the insects to develop as well. So touch wood, we've been okay on that front. So here's the other really interesting thing. We plant corn 2.25, 2.5 inches deep. We plant soybeans 1.25 1.5 inches. In fact, Horst would say you're going to plant ultra early, keep them shallow. Not sure all of us did that, but 1.5 inches soybeans, 2.5 inch corn, and the corn emerges before the soybeans. And you just go, man, how can that be? It takes another 50 crop heat units rather for that extra inch of depth. That makes no sense. Remember that corn's base temperature is 10 degrees Celsius. Soybeans' base temperature is actually 12.5 degrees Celsius. And so that corn planted deeper, soil deeper, might be a little warmer, but not likely. I think it's just that difference in the base temperature, and the corn is emerging faster than the soybeans. So all of that sounds horrendous. On the other hand, we do this YEN program, the Yield Enhancement Network that we have in the wheat crop here in Ontario, and we do tissue samples. And last year, when it was an early year and things looked awesome and we all thought we had the world by the tail, a lot of tissue samples came back with this nutrient a little low, that nutrient a little low. Man, the tissue samples that I've seen coming out of the YEN program, I don't see them all by any stretch, but man, the ones I've seen, wow, I've never seen tissue samples that are that good. Everything looks like it's in the range, or almost everything in the range, almost anything that's really jumping out at you as a problem. So this is the cool weather. Absolutely is cereal weather. All right, let's have a little bit of fun before we get into the alert. From Mike Cobra, they are doing a project on giant hogweed control. You'll know giant hogweed to be a toxic plant. Creates issues with people that walk through it, and it's really hard to control. And it often grows along rough terrain, along water courses, and the seeds float. So it goes to seed, the seeds float, it spreads out into farmers' fields, where it floods out into farmers' fields. Now we got a big problem. Yeah. Their project is to graze it with a collection of both of the wools, although goats aren't really woolly, but I'll put them in with and I hate to admit this, but Lindsay Smith here with Real Agriculture, just love her to death, and she's a sheep farmer, woolly pigs. Yeah, we put those woolly pigs out there, we put them out there with some goats. And Mike said that in 5 acres, in 5 days, the goats and sheep that they put into that area, and it was a ravine, it was not an easy place to get at with equipment. 5 days, the giant hogweed was grazed basically to the ground, and that stuff grows a foot a day. So we finally found a use for some of those goats and sheep. There's more use in that. I love lamb chops as well. But it is kind of cool when we look at these alternative methods, particularly where we can't get equipment in. From Christina O'Reilly, the forage specialist with the Ministry of Agriculture and Food and Agribusiness, that's what it is. If you are looking out in your field and you are seeing Timothy come into head this time of year, guess what? It's not Timothy. It is meadow foxtail, but it actually looks like Timothy. And I never really thought of it that way, but it is kind of cool. Last, the alfalfa harvest is underway, man. Things continue to move on. Bit of a challenge in terms of getting it dry, but very little alfalfa gets harvested as dry hay this time of year. In fact, I would say probably none. And we are hard into the alfalfa harvest, making rocket fuel for those dairy cows. All right. Alert, alert, alert. dang it. It just drives me nuts. We have a stripe rust alert here in the London, Stratford, Clinton, and maybe beyond. We're really astounded how stripe rust has exploded over the last week in particular. I think it was 2 weeks ago that I had concern. We did not anticipate it exploding. We now have it from Chatham all the way to Meaford, and you just have to scout your field. A few quick notes. If you already put a fungicide on, if you put a T1, T1.5, or T2 fungicide on to control mildew, and mildew is also out there, this weather is just ideal for mildew. I found mildew on the flag leaf of some highly susceptible varieties when I was out scouting yesterday, so some very high mildew levels. Ellen Sperry from C&M Seeds looking at the performance trials, saying that in the performance trials she's getting some 6 ratings for mildew, but mildew isn't all that concerning. It hurts yield, but it's not like stripe rust. Stripe rust has simply exploded, and it needs controlled immediately if you have it. You can go from finding the odd lesion in a field to having the field totally yellow in about 5 to 7 days, even with these cool temperatures. They call it yellow death in Europe. There is a reason for that. So, a couple of things to note. First off, all the fungicides have some level of control, pretty good control, in fact, but we can no longer use strobe fungicides. So anything with a strobe in it, we don't want to use that to control the stripe rust, because strobies increase the fusarium risk in the wheat crop. So that's a non-starter. Next, if you are within about 5 days of your T3 fungicide application, then you can wait, and the T3 fungicide application will control the stripe rust. Beyond 5 days, you just cannot wait because it is such an explosive disease. We're really trying to get our brains around why we have such heavy stripe rust pressure this year. We did not expect it. I've been through that in other episodes. I'm not going to spend time there. When we figure it out, I'll tell you. But get out there, scout your wheat. If you have stripe rust, then dang it all, you need to do something about it immediately. Here's just how quick it moves. Pete was out in his wheat field last Wednesday, I think, or Thursday, collecting my flag leaf tissue sample. I didn't see any stripe rust. Back in the field on Monday, and enough stripe rust there that I immediately called my great sprayer operator, Bernie, and Glenn came in and sprayed it that day. That's how quickly it moves. That's why you need to stay on top of it. Meanwhile, there is some other weird stuff going on out there in the wheat crop. Make sure when you look at your wheat that you know what stripe rust looks like. We'll have a picture in the post, but there are also a whole lot of weird things going on in the wheat crop. Leaves that are just simply going off color. You'd think it was physiological fleck, but it's individual plants, or occasionally it's a spot in the field. And if it was physiological fleck, it would be on the entire crop. So, yeah, something weird going on there. Other few things wheat's just fun, man. Ladybugs. We have ladybugs in the wheat crop like crazy. Why do we have ladybugs in the wheat crop like crazy? Just moving in because we are also seeing the aphids move in. In fact, at the Harrow Research Station, they have more aphid pressure in the cereal crop there than they have ever seen before. They are coming in with a vengeance. We also are seeing cereal leaf beetle. I was finding cereal leaf beetle adults and babies, both in the wheat around Clinton. That's a hot spot for cereal leaf beetle. So again, something to pay attention to. If you're in a hot spot, make sure you scout for that as well. All right. Let's move on to the next fun topic, and that's the fact that 28% nitrogen is in very short supply in the province of Ontario. The answer is be patient. There is more 28% coming in. You want to get out there and side dress your corn, and yes, side dressing corn has started in the deep southwest. Just, if you can't do it today, it's not the end of the world. The corn isn't getting too big, so be patient. Probably a day or two it will be there. The other option that is going to maybe come into play is dissolved urea. There was a little bit of a discussion on Twitter about that. At the end of the day, 28% nitrogen or 32%, the UAN solution is urea ammonium nitrate. It's half urea. So there is some thought process that if we need liquid nitrogen to side dress corn and we don't have 28, we can make dissolved urea, and it's just like applying 28, except it will probably be 21% nitrogen, not 28% nitrogen, which means you will have to apply a lot more gallons. But we absolutely can do that. Don't forget, don't try to make it on your own. It's highly endothermic, which means that it needs heat. So let the people with the heated tanks make the dissolved urea. Don't try to do that at home. Some growers have done it, but oh gosh, you can run into all sorts of issues. All right, while we're on fertility, Henry sending a great question from Alberta, where they had corn where the roots were just burnt off, short, stubby, ugly. And to a bunch of agronomists, and a great discussion, could it be that it was wireworm? Well, it didn't really look like wireworm. Could it be that it was herbicide carryover from something like trifluralin, where you get those short, stubby roots? It's an irrigated site, unlikely. Remember, Alberta's dry, so we get carryover. And then we looked at the fertility, and 261 pounds per acre broadcast of nitrogen, potash, and sulfur, plus 5 gallons of 1034O on the seed, and then a half inch of irrigation. Man, here in Ontario, the maximum N plus K that you can apply is 200 pounds per acre, and we're a wet climate. We have lots of water to dilute that. It's a salt injury issue. I'm seeing a little bit of salt injury in other places where we got the fertilizer ban too close to the seed. But pay attention, man. This is another case where the dose makes the poison. Fertilizer is a good thing, but if you put on too much, too close together, then it can become a bad thing, and in this case, definitely a bad thing. On the fertilizer front, an email from Saskatchewan on nano fertilizer saying, okay, Pete, like, is this real? It's super small particles, and they're saying that 250 milliliters of their nitrogen product, which is 7% nitrogen, can replace 20 pounds of actual nitrogen from another source. Okay, wait a minute. Let's go through the math, because that's a pretty big claim. 250 mils, I don't know exactly the specific gravity of that product, but at most it will weigh half a pound. At 7% nitrogen, if I compare that at 100% use efficiency, right? Half a pound of 7% nitrogen, and it is 100% effective. If I look at urea and say it's only 10% effective, which is nitrogen fertilizer, typically 50%, but we'll only give it 10%, well, that 250 milliliters of nitrogen will replace 1 pound of urea if my urea is only 10% use efficiency. There's just no way. Those numbers do not add up because it's a macronutrient. We're removing it in the crop. You have to put enough on to meet the protein demands of the crop. Now, on the other hand, the nanotechnology also talking about micronutrients, totally different scenario. Little particles probably get through the leaf faster or easier. It's not a one-to-one, but they probably get better use efficiency there. And in that case, nanotechnology could work. But yeah, to think that you're going to replace macro elements, I think you're going to need a lot more than 250 mils of a 7% solution to equal 20 pounds of nitrogen. All right, I want to move on. It is a sulfur year. I'm not going to spend long on this, and in fact, I think we need to do an agronomist on this as well. But Johanna just saying, wow, Peter, it is a sulfur year. We are seeing sulfur deficiency where we did not expect it. I have had more emails about mixing issues with ammonium thiosulfate than I've ever had. We have seen issues with sulfur deficiency with lots of manure in the rotation, and that's kind of unusual. So we will have a SWAC topic on sulfur. We probably will do an agronomist. There's just lots going on there. But yes, it is a sulfur year. Pay attention to your sulfur deficiency. Thistle control. Lots of calls and questions coming in about perennial sow thistle, about Canada thistle. How do we control it in corn? How do we control it ahead of edible beans? Man, so we know the products that work. At the end of the day, ahead of edible beans, all we can use is glyphosate. And by the way, the problem is, in both the corn and bean situation this year, there's unlikely enough top growth on that sow thistle or that Canada thistle to really get effective control. I think Mike Cobra had a rhyme about this, and I just don't recall it exactly, but spray it in May, it comes back right away. Anyway, that's about where we're at. It's a cold May, you spray it in May, it's going to come rolling right back, or flying right back. If you can, you delay control on the sow thistle, the Canada thistle, and you get it when it's got more growth. But there's limits to how big the corn can be. In crop, in edibles, we really have no chance. So you just have to do what you can now. And remember, you want to kill those thistles, it's called spray in the fall. That's when we get good control. All right, I'll finish up here really quickly with one last note from Glenn Arnold. Really cool data. You can drag line manure on emerged corn up until V4, that's 4 collars, or what we would call 6 leaf overs. So, not real big corn, but merged corn, the corn that we have right now at 3-leaf stage, you can drag line manure. If you surface apply that manure, it's about a 20 bushel yield hit compared to applying commercial fertilizer. If you can inject that fertilizer, if you can figure out how to side dress that fertilizer, or pardon me, not the fertilizer, the manure, inject it. It's a 15 bushel yield advantage over the best that commercial fertilizer can do. And man, 15 bushels, I'm interested in that. So something to rattle around in the back of your brain, how are you going to make that happen? And by the way, the other thing I will say is we drag line some manure on some wheat fields. And the spread pattern is just horrendous. So while these trials say it can work, and it can, we got to figure out this distribution pattern way better than what we're doing up until this point. It is just nasty in a surface application. And with that downer, that's it. That's all on behalf of the team here at Real Agriculture. This is Wheat Pete with the word for Wednesday, the 28th of May. It'll be June next week, and I'll be back then and talk too long yet again. See you then.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Wheat Pete's Word, brought to you by Syngenta. Stack the deck in your favor in 2025 with the stacked cereals lineup of fungicides and herbicides from Syngenta, and earn partner program points on qualifying purchases. Visit syngenta.ca/partner program to calculate your rewards today.